Hello and welcome to the NTI PodTalk. My name is Dianne Kaler and I'm Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. Join me as I talk to interesting people in the field of health and wellness, food and farming, and anywhere else we find conversations that matter to our community. By listening, you'll learn a little about NTI and a lot about the things and people around you that make a difference for your wellness. Welcome and let's get started. Hello there. Dianne Kaler here, Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute, here to welcome you back to another edition of the NTI PodTalk. I am so happy to have Chef James Barry on our PodTalk today because there's a lot of alignment in our interests. We have a chef program here at NTI, and so this is very much in line with what we teach here, but also Chef Barry has a product that we're going to talk about today that is in line with most everything that we teach here, both in our chef program and nutrition program. So Chef James, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited as well.
Yeah. All right. So, I'll just say at the very beginning, as I was mentioning earlier offline, you and I have met before, even though it may not have been a memorable occasion in that we stayed friends for many years, but we have met before through the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I just have to tell you that one of my first memories of meeting you, and I don't remember why I remember you, but it was many years ago at a Weston Price Foundation meeting, and it's group meals. Everybody kind of sits with everybody else, and I remember sitting at a table with you, and this was many years ago, and I believe I remember you saying it was maybe your first meeting, your first Weston A. Price Foundation meeting. And I think I remember you saying something like, why is everyone so interested in organ meats or something like that? You were, again, memories are not always crystal clear, but I think you were quite surprised. And maybe it wasn't a questioning of why, but you were quite surprised at how passionate people in the Weston Price Foundation are about organ meats. And maybe that's why it was sticking in my head. But anyways.
That's great. I learned about Weston A. Price when I was in culinary school. So this was 20 years ago. And I think I went to my first one. Oh gosh. I mean, not probably around 2000 and well, I'd been to many before that. I used to have a meal delivery service, and I went to a few of them then. But then I really got more involved when I met my wife and we had our firstborn. And I just remember going to this one in Santa Clara, and they used to do the GAPS meetings right after the Wise Traditions. And I would there was one GAPS session where I helped out with the food and whatnot, and maybe there was two. So it's funny. I mean, I feel like I've just been a part of the Wise Tradition kind of culture for so long that I don't even remember all the instances at this point.
I know. Yeah. I started going to meetings like in 2005, 2006, something like that. So
yeah, it was probably right around there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyways, that's, we're not here to talk about the Weston Price Foundation, although we do have that in kind with one another, the long history of participation there. I am interested in what made you want to become a chef and what made you want to get training in how to cook foods, because I just think that so many people are not interested in knowing how to prepare their own foods. They're so used to this mass abundance of, restaurants and 7-Elevens where they, pick up food when they get gas. They're used to having food that is prepared by others everywhere they go. And for my perception is that many people feel like it's no longer necessary or not even something that they desire to do to cook for themselves. And then, of course, as a professional chef, you're cooking for others as well. But what was your interest in becoming a chef?
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely believe that cooking or being in control of one's food is the really truly only way to get healthy. But at the same time, I acknowledge that just because we eat doesn't mean we need to love cooking, and that it's not for everybody. But I loved cooking probably from the age of about 7. I learned how to scramble an egg, and I just immediately fell in love with it. And only later, when I was much older, did I realize, oh, well, cooking is kind of a love language for me. It's how I express how I feel to people. But I never saw it as a career. I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and it just, back in the day, many people may not remember this. I mean, but there were like 2 celebrity chefs in. It was Julia Childs and like the Frugal Gourmet, and they were on PBS, and that was kind of it.
Mhm.
And so this idea that you could do anything but own a restaurant didn't exist. And so, or at least that was the only path I thought a chef could go on, was to own a restaurant. And I just, even at a very young age, didn't want to do that. And it wasn't until, so I didn't embrace my love of cooking at all. I just did it as a hobby. I would read cooking magazines for fun. Just loved learning, but didn't see it as a career until 9/11. That kind of hit home in terms of really making me rethink my life choices, and just really looking for things that have heart, only wanting to do things that have heart. Um, and so I audited my whole life. That event made me look back at everything. And I at the time I was substitute teaching, and I was also acting. I was in LA,
Mm.
and I basically looked back at, well, what did I love as a kid? That's how I audited my life, because I knew that that was a pure time for me, and that that was probably more part of my essence in terms of what I was interested and passionate about. And it was cooking. And so then I started looking into schools, and I found one that fit my needs. Because, like I said, I didn't necessarily want to become a restaurant chef. So I was really looking for a more personalized private chef program, or one that would really help me become more of a private chef, because that was the route I wanted to go. And then that eventually turned into it was kind of interesting. I was cooking for, the pinnacle of celebrities. I was cooking for Tom Cruise. You just, A-list actor. You would say, and many people would say, "Oh, you arrived," right? They would think like, "You're good now. Just keep doing what you're doing, making good money, all that kind of stuff." But I just didn't feel like it was enough. I truly wanted to help more people, and my style of cooking was helping people. And so um, I basically left that cushy job, and I mean, not that it was hard. It was a challenging job, but I just mean it was cushy, and then I was making good money, and I knew what to expect. But I left that to start a meal delivery service, and I did not know what I was doing. I think that's something that we all kind of make the mistake of sometimes, anyone that kind of goes that entrepreneur route. We think that the as the craftsperson or as the chef that we know how to run a chef business. And just because you know how to make a pie doesn't mean you know how to run a pie business. And
Uh-huh.
that was my big learning curve. But then from there, then it became, after I did that, then it became, well, I want to create a food product, do something totally different. And then that's where I am now.
Mhm. Okay, so what was the sort of length of time in this progression from being a personal chef, then doing a meal delivery service, to the product, which we're going to talk about that, but what kind of time length are we talking about?
Well, I think I went to school in 2004, so yeah, 20 years ago. And then right away, so this is kind of interesting for anyone that's thinking of becoming a chef, or even just is in school right now. You really can't learn how to work fast. You can't go to school, read a book, and then understand what it's like to be in an intense kitchen. You have to actually do it.
Mhm.
It's a physical thing. It's not just a mental thing. Um, And so what I did right away is I recognized that, okay, even though I wanted to be a private chef, I still had skills that I needed to learn. I had gone to culinary school. I was already private chefing for different clients, but I knew that there was a big gap. And so I immediately started looking and kind of manifesting uh, situations that I was putting myself in the fire. Like I did this one called the Vans Warp Tour, which was a tour across the country and even in parts of Canada that was 50 states in 60 days. It was just during the summer, but it was really, really intense. Like probably some of the hardest work I've done. That and being a stay-at-home father, which are probably the two hardest
Mhm.
jobs I've ever done. But basically the Vans Warped Tour really taught me how to cook, not only for a lot of people, but how to do it quickly.
Mhm.
It made me a better chef. And then I
Mhm.
got out of that, and that's when I then felt, okay, I think I can do this. And then I just started getting private clients, and I started cooking for a lot of them. And then eventually it turned into cooking for more celebrities that required more of my time. So then it went to just that one, but that was probably about a 4-year period because well, 3 or 4 years. I graduated in 2004, but I started my meal delivery service in 2007. But I was still private chefing, so I kept private chefing, and I ran that meal delivery service for the next 8 years, and I still
Wow.
private chef during that 8 years.
Mhm.
So around 2015 is when I moved from LA. I was selling my company, not necessarily for a lot of profit, but more just because I was burnt. I was
Mhm.
really burnt out. And this is something I would also impart to people is you have to know that while you have a bit more control around being an entrepreneur, like you can kind of control your hours a little bit more. But the biggest thing is that most entrepreneurs, and I talk to a lot of them, uh, most of them, they're out there trying, particularly if they're a healthy entrepreneur. So they're out there trying to support people's health, but yet their health is the one that suffers because
Yeah.
they're taking care of everyone but themselves. And that was me. For 8 years, I ran myself ragged. I was up, got very little sleep. I mean, I worked all the time. Even when we tried to go on vacations, I was still working. And my health went down the tubes. I wasn't working out. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping well. I feel like I aged like 5 years. I aged. I felt like I was 5 years older than I really was. That's what I mean.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so me getting out of that business was really a health decision of recognizing, this, I can't take this business where it needs to go. I'm burnt out. I self-funded that business. And so that was also one of the things I learned is like, if you're not paying yourself right from the get-go, you're going to get burnt out pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Um, and, uh, and so then I that ended around 2015, 16. And then we had our second child around then. And that's when I did the stay-at-home dad thing. And fortunately, my wife was able to kind of cover our costs while I did that. And I was able to get my health back. And by getting my health back, something really important happened. Is this because this is also something a lot of people don't think about is when you are running your business and you're maxed out and you're tapped out, you lose your creativity. Like you literally, it's hard to think. And so I was just kind of running to stand still with that meal delivery service. And then during the 4 or 5 years I had just being a stay-at-home dad, while that was challenging work, I got to sleep a lot. I got to recover. And it was during that time that I got my creative mind back. And I started dreaming more and I started just getting that health back. And that's when I came up with the idea of Pluck. And
Mhm.
as I'm sure we'll go into, what's so amazing about Pluck, and I'm still I'm in awe of it myself, is that it's a natural food product. It is a real food product that no one else had thought of.
Mhm.
And it's like that is such a rare thing in today's day and age. Most new products are laboratory made. They are not just taking two real products. I'm just miraculously the person that actually combined two natural products together that other people had not.
Mhm.
And I just feel really happy about that because I think we suffer from not having enough natural products out there, like real
Mhm.
food products.
Mhm.
So it excites me when I'm able to, that I'm able to promote one that I really believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that. Tell us what this product is, and kind of, you've already sort of introduced how you progressed and transitioned into starting this company. But, this is a very, as you say, unique product, and there had to be some sort of like aha moment, where you came to the conclusion that you needed to create this. So tell us about the product, tell us about Pluck, and talk about how you got to that point.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of the type of chef I am. So I am the type of person, I'm not interested in celebrity culture around chefing. I'm really about like, how can I help people with their food choices? How can I make health more achievable for an individual or a group of people? And I've really identified that, look, we're human, we gravitate toward comfort food. So I can't reinvent the wheel. I can't force, you have to meet people where they are. You can't force them into a diet that they're not ready to do, because it won't last. And I'm only interested in what's sustainable. I have no interest in trends. I don't care about someone dieting for a month. That doesn't do anything. It literally does nothing. So I'm all about, what is the thing that's sustainable? And so I'm always looking for, okay, how can I take these comfort foods? Because those are clearly sustainable, since that's what we gravitate towards. So how can I make these comfort foods more accessible, like more healthy? Um, and that's kind of how I am as a chef. And then you marry that with, then I became a father, and I was constantly trying to figure out, well, how can I get these nutrient dense foods into my daughters without dealing with picky eating, without kind of the hurdles that come with so many healthy foods and nutrient dense foods. So it started with me identifying, well, what are the most nutrient dense foods out there? And organ meats are hands down the most nutrient dense food. I mean, I'll argue anyone on
Absolutely.
that. They just
Yep.
are.
Yep. Same
And
here. Same here.
right. And so then once I identified that, it was like, okay, well, and I know there's probably so many people listening to this that can acknowledge this. Those of us that have been in the field and know that organ meats are the most nutrient-dense foods, I always ask that in a group. I'll say, okay, I'll be like, okay, so organ meats you're supposed to eat them. They're good for you. So how many of you have organ meats in your freezer, and how long they've been there? And everyone will say, oh, a year or 2 years or whatever, right? Because the reality is even when we know we're supposed to be eating them, we still experience hurdles. And so I identify those hurdles, and what I identified was one, that there's still an associated ick taste with them, whether it's psychological or literal. People just don't resonate with the taste all the time. There's sourcing hurdles, and then there's also cooking. Like, people just don't fully remember or know how to cook them properly, and most people are overcooking them, and that's why they taste poorly. So once I identified those, I said, okay, well, how do I make people, how do I support people in getting this nutrient dense food, but getting it as easily, as deliciously, and effortlessly as possible? And that's, I started thinking about, well, how are organ meats eaten currently? Well, they're either eaten wet, so if someone buys them from a farmer, they then cook them themselves, they make them into pâtés, or they're taking capsules. And it's like, well, wait a second, capsules, it's freeze-dried powdered organ meat. There's very little done to it. It's probably the second most nutrient dense way to eat them. The first being raw and uncooked. Secondly, freeze drying is the next most nutrient dense wet form, preservation method of eating them. And so we already have this very dry product. When you freeze dry them, there's very little moisture. So it's something that you can keep on the shelf, and it's usually like a 2-year shelf life. And then I started going, well, what's in a pate? Oh, there's onions, there's garlic, there's herbs, there's these things. And I'm like, wait a second, we have dried herbs, we have dried onions, garlic. And I'm like, well, why can't I just combine those dried ingredients and create something that is really a seasoning blend that people are adding? And that's really where it came from, is just deconstructing the pate and making it into something that's shelf stable. And And what I later learned, I didn't necessarily conceive this early on, but what I later learned was so basically Pluck is 5 organs. It's liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas from a cow, 100% grass-fed cow. And then we combine it with organic spices and herbs. So it's literally a seasoning blend you can put on anything. And what I learned as I started to put this product out there was how versatile it was. I thought originally it was you just put it on meats because it's coming from a cow. But I was so wrong. I mean, we now are told people put it on everything from ice cream to cheeses to
Oh, wow.
popcorn to grains to salads to fish. I've put it on oysters. It's just incredibly versatile, which was a real lesson to me. And then also, it doesn't require a new habit. And that was something when I identified that, I was like, oh, now I'm onto something, because we launched right during COVID. And if people remember when COVID happened, um, the all these good, healthy habits went out the door, and basically everyone started doing all these things that are usually very addictive. Alcohol sales went up, sugar, anything sugary went up, baking, like all these things that aren't necessarily conducive towards a healthy diet all increased, and everything that was healthy just went out the window. And I get it, because people were scared initially, and there were when we have high emotions, we gravitate towards comfort foods, right? So I get it, but that's why I was really excited to think, well, if I can create something that doesn't require a new habit, that's easy and it's delicious, then anything could happen. COVID 5.0 could happen. It wouldn't matter, because it's easy and it's delicious, and you don't have to, it's not something new. We're going to season our food, whether we're angry, sad, or remorseful, we're going to season our food. So, that's what I've learned about this product over the years. And I truly appreciate that, because that is the goal, is to get people to be healthy all the time, not just selectively.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you about that. Because I think so many people look at healthy eating as something that they do, for a short period of time when they want to achieve a specific short-term goal. And then they kind of go back to, all the junk food and comfort foods and all those things come back in, either slowly or quickly. And I think it's amazing that you sort of tapped into this concept that if you can find something that is sustainable, that is something they're going to do all the time anyways, it's a great way to up level the nutrient density of whatever they're eating, and hopefully keep them on track to extend the length of time that they are actually making those more, we'll say healthy choices, because they are, making something that tastes good, and they have a psychological understanding of the nutritional benefits of it. And that helps motivate them to stay on track with eating healthy. So I think it's amazing. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely think it's something I have learned over the years is kind of, I look at health very differently these days. And I think I used to look at it as like, oh, you set goals, you have an outcome that you're looking for, you decide to do it, and then you set it, and a lot of protocols are 6 months, a lot of fitness training can be 3 months. So I think you're right. Like, I think we look at things, health, as a chunk, like a chunk of time. And I really don't look at it like that anymore, because now I've come to realize in my age that the things that truly move the needle are the things we do daily. And I think that we're looking constantly for these huge movements of outcome, and we strive for them. But what happens, and this is proven every year at the top of the new year, is people get all these lofty goals, and numbers will show you that they've all dropped off by February 1st. So they get big goals, and they barely last 2 to 4 weeks, and then they go right back to what they're doing. So I'm now a big proponent of set smaller goals, ones that you can do daily, and just do those, and don't overextend. But I mean, I'm always telling people, like, simply going for a walk after every meal. Like that is a lot. And if you do it daily, you will see changes. Drinking more, for every soda someone's drinking, just drinking 1 glass of two, or even 2 glasses of water. Every time you do it, every time you drink one soda, you drink 2 glasses of water. Just doing that, but doing it every time, you will see movement. And that's one of the biggest questions. One of the top questions we get all the time is like, well, how much am I really getting? And I'm like,
Right.
well, let's look at what you are eating, because here's the deal. It's something like 94% of Americans are nutrient deficient.
Yep.
It's a huge number, but we're not calorie deficient.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you right there that whatever your people are doing isn't working. And it's not an issue of I'm not getting enough food. It's about I'm getting the wrong foods, or I'm getting foods that are not working for my body. And so then it becomes like, well, what's the true issue here is that probably people are so numbed out, and we're so kind of disconnected. As you started this talking about this, we're so disconnected from our food sources. We're so disconnected from how this food is affecting our bodies that we don't even recognize the gains or the losses anymore. That we're in this kind of like very kind of average state. And so I'm always just trying to show people, like, look, I don't care if you want, if you're testing and I'm anemic and that I need a certain amount of organ meats, great. We have that product for you. It's called Pure. It's just organ meats. It's equivalent to getting the fresh organ meats. 2 ounces of fresh is equal to 1 teaspoon of freeze dried. Okay. Like go crazy with that. Do that. But if you're someone who's not testing, which is the majority of people who are just kind of winging it, they said you're already using seasoning blends, and most seasoning blends the majority of them are salt. That is the cheapest ingredient. It's usually the first ingredient, and that is what they have. And the rest is just a little bit of flavoring, and some of them even have ingredients in them that are hurting your health. So you're either adding something that's too much, or you're adding something that's actually harming you and you just don't realize it. And so my whole point is like, you're getting so just switch to Pluck and you're getting amazing flavor, because salt is not our first ingredient, it's our fourth ingredient. So we truly put flavor first, and organ meats is the second ingredient. So it's like your flavor first, you're getting real food nutrition, but you're getting the micro dosing. Yeah, small amounts. However, if you're doing it for every meal, if you're doing it daily, which is how I recommend we do anything healthy, you're going to get cumulative effect. It's going to affect your health, just like, and I always kind of talk about the negative effects of microdosing, which is glyphosate. When glyphosate was put in Roundup and was sold to America, we were sold as it being very micro amounts. Well, those micro amounts have compounded to the point where now we cannot get rid of it. It's in our breast milk, it's in our air, it's in our soils, it's in our water, it's in our food, it's everywhere. And it started out as micro amounts, like small, tiny amounts. So anyone thinks that microdosing doesn't work, it does. And glyphosate is a horrible, is an example of a horrible act of how it works.
Yeah. I have not thought about making that analogy, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to reiterate. It's the little things we do. It's the little things we do, and it's more about duration of how often you do them. That's what will move the needle the most. It will either move it negatively or it'll move it positively, and that's really up to us.
Yeah, I love that. I am a huge fan of organ meats, and everyone who listens to this podcast and anyone who has been a student at our school, whether it's in our nutrition program or the chef program, I talk about organ meats a lot. I always say organ meats are the most nutrient dense foods there are. There are people who push back on that, students even who push back on that initially. And then the more it comes up in the teaching and the more they see about the nutrient density, they suddenly are, they're like, okay, I see it now. It's right there in black and white or whatever color the slide is that I'm showing, that there is obviously a superior nutrient density in organ meats, but there still is that wide gap between, I recognize that they're beneficial and I want to start eating them, but they have that psychological, as you say, yuck factor. And then what I hear a lot of people say is, my grandmother used to make, liver and onions, and it was awful. I hated it. It made the house smell. And so they have this psychological memory of something that tastes bad, smells bad, whatever. And as you say, a lot of times it's because people don't know how to cook them properly, but they need something. And I'll use another, like, maybe poor analogy, but it's like a gateway drug, right? They need something to help get them. And I think, I always say, well, yes, you can do supplements if you don't want to eat, liver every day like I do. You can do supplements, but to have a product like this that is the interim, combination of both, that is something that adds not only nutrient density but flavor to foods. It's a great way to get them on board with feeling better about making a decision that they know is going to improve their health, and actually starting to see the benefits of it after that cumulative effect. So
I
totally agree with everything you're saying.
I think, well, I love that we're going in this direction too, because the lingual neural response is something I've been getting more and more passionate about, and it's one of the reasons why I think it is why I push this form of organ meat. So if you're someone who's not eating them, the reason why I push you to eat it use Pluck as the gateway versus a supplement, an encapsulated supplement, is specifically around the lingual neural response. And what I mean by that is, so we're talking about how we're disconnected from our food sources, but something we're even more disconnected from is our own instincts around what our body needs.
I love that.
Yeah. Bill Schindler, who's a professor of archaeology, has a great quote. He wrote a book called why am I love his book. It's Eat Like a Human. Thank you. Thank you for your patience as I remember that. Yeah, Eat Like a Human. But he has a great quote that says, we are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is truly a disconnect, because
Yes.
we're animals just like all the other species, or most of them at least, right? And so we instinctively knew what we were supposed to be eating in the past, and so we no longer have that skill, but it is in there. And the only way to truly tap that is to eat the food versus swallow it. And I use the example of salt. So if I give you a salt tablet, you swallow that salt tablet, you have no communication between your body, except suddenly maybe 20 minutes later you feel bloated. Why am I bloated? Oh, I got too much of something. Whereas if you put salt on your tongue and you have that lingual neural response, which is basically your biological response to and it starts, I'm talking about it with salt on the tongue, but technically, ancestrally, it starts with our eyes. You see something in the distance. Yep. What is that? It starts with maybe a bright color or some kind of color or some shape, right? And this is, even how I'm talking about this is something that if any chef is, in training is listening to this is how you want to think about food when you're cooking it for your client. Which is you want to go beyond just taste, and you want to think about what it is that connects us to food and our own ancestral kind of instincts. And so it starts with the eyes, and then as you bring it closer to your face, and sometimes it then goes to your hand or touch, because you're then grabbing it from a tree or a bush or whatever, right? And then it gets closer to your nose, and now it's a smell. And these are all, every aspect of this, from the eyes to the touch to the nose, the olfactory, they're all communications that are happening to your brain, and your body is responding. to, do I want this? Do I need this? Now you're putting it in your mouth. There's a mastication that happens that breaks open that food, and the flavor starts to hit your flavor receptors and your body the whole time. More communication. Is this bitter? Is this poisonous? Is this something that is it flavorful? That might mean it has nutrition. So communication. Does my body need this? How much does it need? And it's instantaneous. And we know that with salt. You put salt in your tongue, instantaneous reaction. You can try to dip it a second time. It might still taste good, but I guarantee it will not taste good the third time, because now your flavor receptors are completely blown out, and they're like, stop, 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 right? They tell you that. It's because they tell you that because it tastes weird. It tastes different than it did the first time. And so that's now your body communicating to you, like, I'm good, I got enough, like, let's stop. We don't get that when we swallow a capsule. Well, we do, we get that communication, but it's late. And that's why a lot of people that do those capsules tell me, they're like, oh yeah, I followed the bottle, it told me to take 6 to 8, I swallowed 6 or 8 or whatever they did, and they're like, and I felt so nauseous. And I'm like, yeah, because there's probably a few reasons. One is because you probably got too much. Your body wasn't ready for it. It could be that your elimination pathways are not working very well. It could have been that you didn't have anything else going on in your stomach at the time. And so it's too intense of a nutrient, load. But there's lots of reasons. But had that person been eating it, their body wouldn't have let them go that far.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm such a proponent of, like, look, make your own food choices, but listen to your body and do it in this natural way of eating versus swallowing as much as you can. Now, I know anyone out there, and I'm currently on a protocol myself, like sometimes you get tested, you get your blood tested, you get your stool tested, you learn, okay, I am depleted in certain ways, I need support. And you're getting, in that instance, yes, supplements absolutely make sense. It's highly recommended. Then it's being overseen by someone that can kind of gauge, you're testing your body, you're gauging things, they're supporting your process. But if we're just guessing, there's no way to guess, or there's no way to fully know unless you're eating the food. The guesswork is just swallowing things. That's always guesswork. Even when a practitioner is working with you, it's still guesswork, but they're guessing based off of tests.
Yes.
You're guessing off of just random, things. Sometimes even, your brain or your ethical soapbox or whatever it is, those are guesses. You don't really know unless you eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And totally agree. I am definitely a food first practitioner, and that's what we teach here, food first. Supplements are, just as the word says, supplement on top of an already existing nutrient dense diet when needed, but certainly not reliance on supplements as your only source. So I love how you make that connection between, with organ meats, having a product that you can actually use as a food, that is different than getting a piece of fresh meat or fresh organ meat and cooking it in a way that you're not comfortable with and maybe don't like the smell of and all that kind of stuff. So that's all awesome.
Well, we see it, by the way. It's so interesting when we see it in kids the most. But when kids get access to Pluck, now these are obviously kids who are not eating organ meats in their diet, they're not getting organ meats in their diet. When they get a hold of Pluck and they stick their finger in there and put it on their tongue, they actually have, most of them have a almost addictive response, like, oh, I want more, and they can't help it. Now I know it is flavorful, but I would bet anything that their body is communicating them, no, it's the nutrition. I need more of this nutrition. And that, it's so fascinating. I can't even tell you how many, Diane, how many customers will tell us, oh, we ran out and my kids started crying. They were so upset. Kids get really into it. And that's, my own kids love it. They put it on everything. And it's like, yeah, the excuse is for the flavor, but our bodies know what it needs. And when you get real food nutrition, the body knows exactly what to do with it, and it will not let you overeat unless you're completely disconnected from your body. It won't let you overeat it. It won't let you go into this kind of like danger zone of getting too much of a good thing unless you're disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah, I am so glad we're talking about this because, you know, there are these theories and concepts about how the tendency to overeat and this obesity epidemic that we have is because people are so nutrient dense and they just continue to eat and eat and eat because their body is signaling to them to eat more with the intention of actually getting more nutrients in. But people, as you say, are disconnected with that. And so they're just eating more, you know, whatever, chips or whatever. They get the signal to eat, but they're missing out on the signal of eat to get more nutrients, not eat to just get more calories.
And
And
it's not their fault too,
no,
right?
no,
I
no,
mean,
no, absolutely, yeah,
because nutrition, like I said, historically, in nature, flavor meant nutrition.
yes,
That's when you found in nature something had flavor, that indicated to your body this is built into our cells, and it's our ancestral brain that knows this, that flavor equals nutrition. But now, I mean, we're all messed up, right? Because
yeah,
things can have flavor but have zero nutrition. You know, all these kind of ultra processed foods, and it's completely
yeah,
confusing our bodies and brains, and then we end up with, yes, an obese and overweight nation because of it. And it's not our fault. It's they're playing off of our kind of like ancestral brain, our ancestral knowledge of what it needs, and they're tricking us. They're absolutely tricking us and manipulating us. And you know, for that level, it's not our fault, but it is
yes,
our fault when we then put it in our mouth. So we,
yeah,
like, I don't want to take all the blame off of us. We're choosing it with our dollars, and we're choosing to put it in our mouth, and that is we have to always remember that we have to be of sound mind and body, that it is our choice based on what we put in our body, right? Once we put it in our mouth, yes, we lose some of that control because now it's this laboratory ultra processed food, and they're playing with our body's kind of hunger signals and all that stuff, right? As you mentioned. But before that act, you have to remember it is your choice. And I hear, like, when I used to private chef all the time, I heard this all the time. My kid is so addicted to Cheerios, like I don't know how to get them off. And I'm like, well, Cheerios don't grow on trees. Who's bringing it into the house?
right, yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like this is,
right,
anyone that's addicted to something, just stop bringing it into your house. And I promise you, you will initially have some growing pains with that. You know, you'll go through a period of, like, you know, withdrawal, but then once you get past that, you'll see it's actually pretty easy to not eat junk if it's not in your house. You
yes.
can't bring it in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like in the same vein of that, anytime, you know, I am working with a client or I talk to someone about making dietary changes, it must be a family-wide choice, right? Because you
Yes.
can't have one cupboard with one person's foods in it and another cupboard with another person's foods in it. Because if the one that has all of the junk food and the highly addictive foods is sitting there, the person who's got the other cabinet is going to start dipping into that cabinet. And there's no way that you can actually achieve long-term sustainable, you know, meaningful effects if you've got all these different paradigms going on in the same household. And it's another reason why I'm so much of an advocate for, you know, family meals where everybody's eating the same food. I see it so often where you know, the parents get one meal and the kids get something else because whatever the parents are eating is deemed unsatisfactory or not enough flavor or something that the kids
Yeah.
wouldn't
Or
like or
too
whatever.
adult or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too adult, yeah. And so they're, you know, they give their kids mac and cheese and chicken nuggets, and the parents are eating something else that potentially has vegetables and all kinds of stuff, but, you know, oh, my kids won't eat it, so they get a separate meal. And I'm like, no, no, no. Everybody must eat the same thing. And, you know, you put intention into making that same thing as nutrient dense as possible. Um, And so, yeah, it is a passion of mine to make sure that, you're not trying to do separate food paradigms for each person in the household.
I wholeheartedly, excuse me, wholeheartedly agree. I also, yeah, I'm constantly teaching people to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the first things when I used to work with clients, that I would tell them is stop making 3 meals, you make one meal, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, a lot of times, and I'm sure you see this as well, like people will fight you. And well, you mentioned that even in the classroom, when you talked about organ meats, people
Yeah.
fought you.
Yeah.
How did they fight you? Like, what was their argument?
Well, I think they are surprised to hear. So I think a lot of people think of, their grandparents or their great grandparents, depending on how old they are. They see, and the liver and onions comes up a lot because that is sort of I guess, a traditional way of preparing liver is liver and onions. And they see it as kind of old fashioned and, oh, that's something my grandmother used to do. And my grandmother, it didn't smell good. And then you're pairing it with, I don't know, the smell of mothballs. Maybe I'm aging myself because I remember that's what my grandmother's house smelled like, was mothballs. But, and it just seems old fashioned and kind of like, why would you even do that anymore? That, who eats liver now? That's one side. And then the other side is people like, oh, that's disgusting. The liver is so toxic, and I'm like, no, you don't understand, you need to understand actually how a liver works. If the liver were the storage place for toxins, when we or an animal is born, our liver would be this tiny, tiny, tiny,
Right.
so that all the toxins we consume throughout our life has a storage place so that it can grow over life to accommodate all of those toxins. That's not how it works. The liver processes toxins, yes, but it processes them in a way that gets rid of that puts them into a way for the body to get rid of them. It is not a storage place for toxins. And I hear this so often. People say, well, doesn't the liver store toxins? No. Well, of course, if the animal is, unhealthy and eating a bad diet, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, then potentially the liver is a source of toxins. But if you're eating organ meats, particularly liver, from an animal that is eating its natural diet, liver is not toxic. And
Yeah,
so those are the two big pushbacks that I get, I think.
I always tell people, I'm like, it's not a sponge, 'cause people
Yes.
think it's a sponge, and it's like, it's not. It has a job to do, and if it didn't do it well and it actually clogged up the way people think it does, then it wouldn't be doing it. It wouldn't be able to do its job. And so then the body we forget how miraculous this human body is. I mean, it's truly miraculous. It is an amazing, amazing machine that we don't fully even understand. And we're constantly learning about, and I think, if anyone thinks that anything we have in our body is just kind of superfluous, or just is just designed to like get clogged up, and then you kind of that's it, then they're completely undermining the miraculousness of this body. But yeah, I always mention that, basically what the liver is doing is it's taking these toxic byproducts, or they're not toxic necessarily, but they're byproducts, and it's converting them to water soluble form so that it can leave your body, because it needs to be in water soluble form to leave either through your sweat, your pee, your poop. Like that's how it gets out of our body. And the reality is that where do toxins get stored? Well, they get stored in fat. And even when an animal is unhealthy, what happens usually first is they get fatty liver, issues. Like, so there's fat that starts to build up around the liver, and that's where the toxins get stored. Because if they got stored in the actual liver, then you're on your way to dying. And that's, and that it does happen, of course, with alcohol, disease and whatnot. And that can happen, but it takes a very long time, which is a sign of how resilient the body is. And then that is, something that's important is when people are losing weight or detoxifying, that's yet another example of why you don't want to go too fast with things. Because if you detox too fast and you're someone who's extremely overweight, who's been eating like a standard American diet for a long time, you're going to have a lot of toxins in your fat. And if you detox too fast, you're going to get sick. You will absolutely get sick because those toxins will not be able to leave your body fast enough because you're losing the weight too fast. So,
Yeah.
you know, the better, you know, like that slow and steady is to me like the way to do most things.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, so let's talk about quality. You know, obviously you have put a lot of thought into this product for the nutrient density. What about quality of the ingredients that you're using? How do you identify sources for your ingredients? And how do you ensure that you are choosing the best quality ingredients?
It's an interesting discussion because I think that there's lots of easy, you know, low-hanging fruit answers I could provide, you know, organic, grass-fed, 100%, which I will talk about, but I think I could kind of go in a different direction as well, which is I think on a certain level, we are getting too bogged down with some of these details because the reality is that even the things we're doing, and I'm sure you know people like this. I definitely know people like this. I used to work with a lot of people like this, that they're so hyper vigilant about all these different terms and the sourcing of these things, and they have to be from this and they have to be from that, that they literally work themselves in a tizzy if it's not like that. And what I've been learning over these last 20 years is that actually more times than not, the things that we think we're doing that are so pure are not. That there's some, like, we only know what we know. And a lot of times, I mean, think about how many times in our lifetime has this come up where, oh, the extra virgin olive oil we've been sold is actually not all fully extra virgin. It's like it's a hybrid of a little bit of olive oil and all these other oils, you know, like that we're being sold one thing and then learn later that it's something else. That is happening constantly. So we only know what we know. And by putting so much emphasis on these kind of labels and these qualities, we're forgetting about two really important pieces, and they tie into quality very much so. But one is, what is the energy or the life force of the animal, particularly if you're eating animals, but it could be vegetables as well. Like, where is it being raised? Where is it being grown? Anything like that. So thinking about that. And then what is my energy when I'm either preparing it and or eating it? Like those two things are really, really important in my judgment. And so to talk about quality, 100% grass-fed is an environment that a cow is designed to eat. Now, what does that mean though? Because grass-fed, technically, it's very rare in the world to find a region where an animal can graze on grass year round. It's very challenging. Now, New Zealand, they pretty much can, and that's one of the reasons why we do source a lot of our grass-fed beef from New Zealand, because it's a very high quality. It's an island. They're able to control their resources in a way that other countries cannot. Does that mean that they are perfect? They are not perfect. We saw that they're not perfect during COVID, right? Like they had regulations and things like that many of us didn't agree with, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot, they're human too, but they are fairly, you know, they are able to kind of raise their cows with green grass longer. Now, does that mean grass-fed is only good in New Zealand? No, because obviously there's other farms where they're able to use hay and other supplemental kind of grasses. Sometimes they ferment the grass so that the grass is more nutritious and easier to digest for the cows. But they're obviously looking after the cow's welfare. And that's ultimately what we're talking about, right? We can talk about what they're eating, but really what we want is them to be raised naturally and properly and humanely. That's really what we want as consumers. And what's interesting is that even within that, we're a little confused because I know my wife's cousin is works in the industry, and she's constantly sharing with me how she will have to go. She'll go to these. She lives in Ohio, and she'll go to these. Or sorry, Iowa. She lives in Iowa, and she'll go to these farms that are selling their meat is 100% grass fed, and she'll learn that their cows are unhealthy because a lot of people don't know how to actually raise their cows on grass. Like they don't really understand that a cow still needs some supplemental sources. They got to make sure the grasses are mixed, that they're getting nutrients just like us, right? We can't eat the same food all the time, right? So we're going to miss out on certain nutrients. And so it's just it's just fascinating because you start to learn like it's not a perfect system. So let's stop pretending it is, and let's focus on the things that really do matter, which is our energy, humaneness, how things are raised, but then also our energy when we're eating them. So I'm looking for 100% grass fed. I'm also looking for it with the spices and herbs. Here's another kind of like pulling back the curtain. So herbs and spices, when they're organic, and this goes for even fruits and vegetables. Yes, the understanding is that it can't be genetically modified, which is a good thing. You're hoping that the company is being honest. Of course, there's cross contamination, and you never know. And they're not testing every single one of them, so they don't know either, right? They do here and there tests, and they hope that it's okay. But then like spices and herbs, those spices and herbs in general it's a very dirty business, particularly when you're importing spices and herbs from abroad. They leave them out to dry a lot of times, like peppers, for example. They're leaving them out to dry on these huge canvases or something like that, but they're on the ground. There's critters and things that crawl in there and do their business. And so that's why if you talk to most brokers that are doing spices and herbs, they'll say, oh yeah, I never buy organic, because it's just, you cannot trust the source all the time. And so I like to just fumigate everything, because I don't want anything that's going to cause me ill will, in that food. So then that becomes another thing of like, okay, well, but is fumigation something that you care about or not, right? So at all these different touch points, there's something that's not right. And it's not perfect. And it's not perfect in conventional. It's not perfect even in organic. So that's why then when I think about spices and herbs, I default to, okay, well, can we focus on a company, or let's just say if you're buying for yourself, can we go to farmers markets? Can we go to places where you're actually getting it from the person that's growing it? You can even go visit their farm. So the more you can actually see and experience what they're doing versus just being told, that's really great. But if you can only be told, then, follow your instincts on that, and, see how it feels when they talk to you, if it feels authentic or not. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to make a choice. And the choice for me is, okay, it's got to be real food. I'm looking for things as natural as possible. So I do choose, organic, non-GMO. But sometimes if it's way more expensive or it doesn't look good, like, because you'll be in the store and you'll see the organic and it looks horrible and the conventional looks better, sometimes I will buy conventional. Like I just follow my instincts with it, but I don't make blanket statements of like, this is how it always has to be, because sometimes it doesn't work. And then I look for wild fish, not farmed, because the farmed, fish, you don't know what it's being fed, which goes back to that. How is it being raised? What's its feed? Is it humane? All that kind of stuff. What's the life of that fish or animal? And then if it's meats, I'm looking for 100% grass fed. But sometimes you can't find 100% grass fed. Sometimes it's conventional is all you have. And this is kind of why I then default to, is it better to buy a processed grass fed meal that you can't control the ingredients, that they added preservatives and they added all these stabilizers to, or to buy conventional ingredients that you are now in control of, that you made yourself? Right? It's like one fits your ethical or your ideas of what you think you want, but one is you're in control of the ingredients, and you get to pick and choose what's in it. And I would always go that route. I always look, that trumps, like, we create this hierarchy of what matters to us. And I guess that's all I'm really trying to advise to people, is like, don't expect it to be perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. If you want to convince yourself that it is, then great, but it's not. It's really not a perfect system. It's a broken system. And a lot of times companies are lying to us. And so what can we do now? Now that you have that information, what do we do next? And I don't want someone to then default to processed foods. I still would rather have them eat organ meats and meat and fresh vegetables and fruit. So to me, the next best option is to choose the thing that you have access to that's real ingredients, that is an ingredient versus has ingredients. And then lastly, I would just add, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, which is like, what is your energy then when you're eating this food? So, because if you're so hyper connected to all these labels, and then you're eating these foods stressed out because it didn't fit your definition of labels, or you're going out to eat and you're not enjoying yourself because that restaurant doesn't have the thing that fits your labels, then is it really a good life? Because we're only on this planet for a short time. And I think it's really important to find a good state of where we are. Like, I would rather eat a conventionally sourced meal and eat it in bliss, like eat it in a state of like truly believing that whatever I put in my mouth is gonna provide health, and be in a state of parasympathetic mode, than to be stressed out, not enjoying the people I'm around because it's not 100% grass-fed meal, which is really, that's the norm, right? Because it's pretty hard when you are eating out or even going to someone else's house for dinner, that they're going to meet your standards. So what I'm talking about may seem like it's not, it's the exception, but actually what I'm talking about is the norm. The exception is where the situation is fully in your control. That's the exception. So I know that was a long-winded answer, and it hopefully wasn't too confusing to
No,
people.
it's okay. It's okay. I totally agree with you that even though we may have these standards that we assess based on the words that are put on the label of the thing that we are buying, we still can never be sure that those words actually reflect what's in the package or the bag or the box or whatever. Because we can't, each one of us, do everything that is necessary to sustain our own existence. We have to rely on others at some point in time. Whether it's accessing those base ingredients to prepare those foods in our own home, or going to a friend's house or going to a restaurant, whatever, you are still relying on someone else to do something, because I can't grow all of the spices and herbs. I can't grow all of the, I eat avocados every day. Well, I can't grow avocados in Colorado. So you are still relying on someone else to be authentic and, hopefully tell us the truth and actually use those labels with integrity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Accountability and transparency. You just hope. You hope.
So I totally agree with you, and we can only do the best we can, because as you say, if you get too worked up about it, you will work yourself into a frenzy where you stop eating. You stop eating, and the more you restrict your diet, the more likely you are to become nutrient deficient. So
when I always point out to people as well, particularly when I was private chefing, and this is connected, is that I can feed you the best food in the world, but if you're not digesting it properly, it really doesn't matter.
There you go. Right. And
when you're stressed out and overwhelmed, we do not digest properly. We just don't. And so you really, I'm more and more trying to steer the conversation towards what is the energy we're in when we're eating, and really making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for that, and not just putting all the focus outside of ourselves, but that we're really like kind of gauging of like, for example, like taking a moment before you eat, the prayer or gratitude, anything like that. I'm always telling people, like, that's a good first step, because that just gets you to stop for a second and check your energy. and that right there will move mountains for people. I mean, it really
Right.
will. And there's so many things like, we talk about in the placebo effect, right? In any of these studies. Well, the placebo effect is really it, the reason they have to test for it, because it actually works, right?
Yeah,
It
right, it
actually
does.
works. If
Yeah,
you believe it,
one third of the time, placebo effect works.
it works.
Yeah.
And so I'm always telling people, like, look, that is a sign that if you believe it, then it's true. And so why not believe that no matter what the sources of the food that you're eating, why not believe that it's going to give you health, happiness, and joy, or whatever it is that you meditate on? It's like why not? What's at loss for you to do that? I still do believe you should be focusing on ingredients, and like we said, the grass-fed and organic. Like I think it's to your advantage to think like that in this modern world, but or buying local and knowing your farmer and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't hurt to still add in, no matter what you eat, this meal is for my health. This is for my advantage. It's going to make me better, whatever you want to put in there, and to truly believe it. I can't even tell you. I mean, this isn't necessarily true for people that are celiac, but for people that are sensitive to gluten, I know for a fact, I've watched it happen. They will let's say they're eating a meal that has gluten in it. If they get themselves in a state of true like bliss, where they believe anything that goes into their mouth is going to be for their advantage and for their health, they will eat that meal and have no digestive distress, none. So that's placebo effect to a degree, right? So like it's not going to work every time, but what's at risk for us to just put ourselves in a state and to make those kind of choices from that state? Like, and it really, and someone could argue like, oh, well, are you saying I can eat donuts and, put myself in a joyful state? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I want you to still make the choices that are in integrity with your body and your desired outcome. But I also don't want you to get so bogged down with the details of those choices that, to your point, you're either not eating, or you're stressed out, or you're not socializing, you're not living life. I think we have to pick what's important. And at my age, like, I really do see like life is very short, and we need to make sure that we're enjoying this ride, because once it's gone, it's gone. That's all we know. We don't know what happens after we die. We really don't, right? I mean, there's lots of stuff that could happen. You could be reincarnated, but we don't know. We don't know. So what we know is we have this body, we have this lifetime. And so the more we can fully enjoy that. And here's what I'll add as well, is that, just like we were talking about that kind of preconceived notion around how people look at food, and this idea of like flavor, and you can't stop eating because the flavor doesn't have nutrition tied to it. Well, I'll offer as well that I think we have socialized ourselves to believe that food needs to matter so much, that we need to celebrate our lives with all this junk food. Like, we have to remember that is a socialization. That is not a basic instinct. It's not. Most people look at food, like probably ancestrally, they looked at food as fuel. They did not look at it. And sometime it was a group thing where you're together in your hearth, you're enjoying a meal together, but you weren't necessarily enjoying the food. You were enjoying the company and the act of what you just co-created together. Yes, the food contributed to that, but we weren't like, I guarantee, back in the day, I'm talking ancestrally, they didn't make a cake on someone's birthday. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Right.
it just didn't happen,
Right.
It's so this idea that we think that we have to, kind of reward ourselves or for anything with food. And this idea that I love food, like putting that kind of emphasis on it I think it sets us up to make choices that are not conducive towards the desired outcome we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at the time, and I have taken up so much of your time today, and I am having such a great time here. This is really a fascinating conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm just noticing, oh my gosh, we've been on here for over an hour, and I think you and I could talk a lot
Yeah,
about many things.
definitely.
We're very much in alignment on thoughts and beliefs about many things. So, tell us, where to find your product, how to access your product, and how many you have. Several different flavors, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, we do. So we have there's 4 products. One is this one. This is our first one. It's called All Purpose or Original. We changed the name to Original. And it's the yellow bag. And that one is probably our best seller. And you can find it on our website or on Amazon, but our website is eatpluck.com. And then we have a green bag, which is called Zesty Garlic. And that one's really cool because it's also autoimmune protocol. So it's AIP friendly and it has no nightshades or seeds. So that's a really neat one for anyone out there that has sensitivities. Then we have spicy mild, which is really, it's kind of it's our original with slightly different blends. So it has very similar ingredients, but just slightly different amounts. And then it has like gosh, what did it? I think it was jalapeno or I can now. It's so funny. I'm forgetting now what spice I put in there. I don't know why. I normally know this stuff, but basically we made it spicy, but it's not too spicy. It's very mild. It's a good entry point for particularly if you want to start exposing your kids to a little bit of heat. But I designed it to be flavor first, and then the heat comes in right at the end. Oh, it's cayenne. Sorry, so it's cayenne that's in it, and then our fourth one is one I mentioned earlier, which is called Pure, and that one is just organ meat. So it's a way for people to maximize the nutrition because the other 3 have a percentage of organ meats in it, but those 3 are really about kind of lifestyle and gateway. So we're introducing organ meats into your diet. Yes, you're going to get them over time, but if you really know I need more nutrition right up front, then the Pure is a great option because you can also add it to anything that's sweet or savory. That's kind of what's nice about the other 3 products are very savory, but Pure, you could add it to brownies if you wanted to. You know what I mean? Like literally, you can go in it. You could put it in a smoothie, a sauce, a dressing, and we usually mix it into ground meats as well. And then the other cool thing is and this is a whole other topic I'm sure we could go off on, is like, but Pure is also really great for pets like cats and dogs. And because it has no salt in it, it has no spices and herbs, which you don't want to give them. And what's the topic though that's so absurd is that a lot of pet food doesn't have organ meats in it, and it's so absurd. It really should. So we find that adding a little Pure to our cat's food or our dog's food, they go crazy for it. So it's a really great way to get your picky animal to eat their food or to just give them a boost in nutrition, just like you're doing for yourself.
I never thought about that. That is a great idea. Because pets need to eat nutrient-dense foods as well.
Well, and they want it. Like when an animal, in the wild, when an animal kills another animal, that's the first thing they eat is the organ meats.
Yeah.
And the stomach as well. They eat the stomach of it, and they usually what happens, they'll eat the stomach and they'll get some of the nutrition up from the animal that they killed of what the animal was eating. So a
Yes,
lot of
from the
people think,
stomach,
oh,
yeah.
yeah, so they get it from the stomach, but that's mostly what they eat. They don't go straight for the muscle meat.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea.
But you can find us at eatpluck.com and Amazon, and then you can also find us on socials at eatpluck as well. And I'm Chef James Berry on socials, so either.
Okay. Oh, great. Good. Do you do social media every day?
I try. I'm sure. I wonder if you're similar. Like I fight it, and I know I shouldn't, but those of us that grew up without it, it's really challenging for me to really like to want to share every aspect of my life every day. That's the wall I hit all the time.
I know, yeah. Well, and actually, I will admit that I don't do social media personally, at all.
Good for you.
for our school, I have a staff member, well, several staff members that participate in creating our social media presence. And so that I don't have to do it because it is not something that I want to do. But I'm always, I don't know, interested certainly, but a little enamored by people who can have the wherewithal to do it on a daily basis. Cause I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so draining, but
It does to me too, but I kudos to the people that are doing it, and it is interesting too, because talking about ultra processed foods, I kind of see social media in the same light because
yep.
we were talking about how these ultra processed foods are designed to get us to eat them. They're not designed for our health or our nutrition. They're designed to just consume. And that's really what social media is designed to do as well. Like they have algorithms that know exactly how long a video should be so that you'll keep interest, you'll keep engaged, you'll keep consuming the social. So I don't know. Like I said, those of us that know different, it's just it's really hard to get on board when you're aware of like, well, I don't see ultra processed foods being good for me.
Right.
And so how can social media be that good for me either?
Yeah.
But it is becoming
Ultra processed
normal.
consumption of
Yeah, exactly. But it
media.
is
Yeah.
also becoming the normal way to communicate. And
Yeah.
so maybe it's creating value that way. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 I'm on board with that as well. All right. Well, as I said, this has been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. And I hope people give your product a try and use it as a gateway if they have not yet taken the leap to include organ meats in their diet daily. So,
Well, thank you so much for your support, Diane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks, Chef James. We'll connect later, maybe at another Western Price meeting.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Diane Kaler here again. If you found this conversation interesting and haven't already become a student at NTI, check us out at ntischool.com. We hope to see you soon.